What if I told you that the true history of grand mansions is not written in ballroom books, but in the invisible ink of the night's silence? During the day, these houses shone with gold and crystal, showing the world the perfect facade of the impeccable lives of wealthy families. But when the chandeliers went out and the last guest left, the corridors were filled with a completely different life, hidden from prying eyes. Servants, gliding through the house like silent shadows, witnessed dramas that never made it into the newspaper chronicles. They saw what the mistresses hid even from their husbands and heard words that were never spoken in the light of day. Here in the dim light, luxury ceased to be a protection and turned into a golden cage from which there was no escape. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one broken vase could reveal a secret capable of destroying the reputation of an ancient family. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the luxurious life of the past? The mansions of the Gilded Age were designed so that the lives of the owners and servants never intersected unnecessarily. Architects created intricate systems of secret staircases and hidden corridors that ran through the house like a circulatory system. This allowed maids and footmen to appear out of nowhere and disappear once their work was done. But it was this invisibility that made them the most dangerous witnesses, impossible to hide from in one's own home. Servants knew their master's habits better than they could have imagined, noticing the slightest changes in mood and routine. They saw who left their bedrooms under the cover of night and who returned to them just before dawn. The rustle of silk in a dark corridor could tell a story that was carefully hidden behind polite smiles during the day. Any closed door was only a conditional barrier for a servant because they always had keys and duties that required access. The nightlife of the mansion had its own special rhythm, different from the daytime hustle and bustle and formal receptions. When the masters dispersed to their rooms, the house filled with sounds that were drowned out by conversation and music during the day. The creaking of floorboards, muffled sobs behind a wall, or quiet whispers in the library became part of the nighttime symphony. The servants on night duty learned to distinguish these sounds and draw the right conclusions. Their silence was part of the contract, an unwritten rule for survival in this world of strict hierarchy. A talkative maid or footman could lose their job without references, which meant complete poverty in the collapse of their life. Therefore, they kept what they saw to themselves, discussing the secrets of their masters only in the narrowest circle, in the basement rooms for the servants. These secrets became a kind of currency that they possessed but were afraid to spend. For a woman of high society, the presence of servants was both a necessity and a curse. She was never truly alone, even in the most intimate moments of her toilet or rest. A personal maid knew more about her mistress's body, her ailments, and her fading beauty than her own husband did. This created a strange, sometimes painful bond between two women from different worlds. The night corridors held memories of footsteps that should not have been heard and encounters that should not have taken place. The servants saw how the weight of social norms broke the destinies of young girls who were married off for convenience. They were silent witnesses to tragedies that played out against a backdrop of incredible luxury and wealth. And often they were the only keepers of the truth when the family's history was rewritten for the official chronicles. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world where the traditions of service were different. Where are you from? Do you agree that walls have ears? Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new stories from the past. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what was hidden behind the doors of the wealthiest bedrooms? In the Victorian and Gilded Ages, separate bedrooms for spouses were the norm in large mansions. And this was dictated not only by fashion. This physical separation often became a symbol of the emotional gulf between husband and wife. The doors connecting their rooms could remain locked for weeks, months, and sometimes years. For women of that time, the bedroom was their personal fortress, the only place where they could take off their social armor. Here they were alone with their thoughts, fears, and disappointments, hidden from prying eyes. The luxurious interior, silk wallpaper, and soft carpets often served only as a backdrop for deep loneliness. The richness of the surroundings could not compensate for the lack of emotional warmth and understanding. The servants who brought morning tea or lit the fireplaces could clearly see the signs of this alienation. They noticed how rarely the master crossed the threshold of his wife's boudoir and how formal their meetings were. The unmade bed in the husband's room or Conversely, the perfectly smooth sheets spoke volumes. These details painted a picture of a marriage that existed solely to maintain status and continue the family line. Nightly visits from their husbands were often perceived by women not as a manifestation of love, but as the fulfillment of a burdensome duty. In an era when female pleasure was not discussed and often ignored, intimacy could be a source of anxiety. Servants heard footsteps in the hallway, a short knock on the door, and the silence that followed. In the morning, life returned to normal, and spouses met at breakfast like polite strangers. There were cases when the bedroom became a place of voluntary confinement, where the mistress spent days on end, citing migraines. It was a way to avoid tedious social obligations and meetings with an unloved husband. The illness gave her the legal right to privacy and peace, which were so lacking in their public life. The servants supported this illusion, protecting their mistress's peace and guarding her from the outside world. The coldness in their relationship was often compensated for by excessive concern for outward glamour and material goods. Gifts of jewelry often served as an apology for indifference or infidelity, and women accepted these gifts. Necklaces and bracelets became cold consolations, signs of reconciliation in a war without winners. Each new item in the jewelry box could tell the story of another offense or reconciliation. But sometimes, even in these cold corridors, there were stories of secret, forbidden love, which we will discuss further. What do you think could separate bedrooms have helped preserve marriages in those days? In the next chapter, you will learn how women coped with pain that could not be shown to a doctor. What I am about to show you was considered normal at the time, but today it would horrify any doctor. On the elegant bedside tables next to the beds of noble ladies, there was often a whole array of beautiful bottles. They did not contain perfume or cosmetic oils, but powerful substances designed to calm shaken nerves. Laudanum, morphine, and opium drops were constant companions of women from the upper classes of that era. These remedies were prescribed by doctors with frightening ease for everything from insomnia, melancholy, menstrual pain, or simply a bad mood. Women locked in the golden cages of their mansions sought salvation from anguish and inner emptiness in these drops. A few drops on a sugar cube or in a glass of water, and reality became softer and problems receded. It was a quiet, socially acceptable way to escape reality without causing a scandal. The servants who cleaned the rooms saw how quickly the bottles emptied and how often new ones had to be ordered. They noticed a strange, glassy gleam in their mistress's eyes and her unnatural sluggishness in the mornings. The maids knew that sometimes their mistress could not get out of bed not because of illness, but because of the effects of the medicine. But discussing this was strictly forbidden, because the reputation of the house had to remain impeccable. The addiction developed imperceptibly under the guise of treatment and was often attributed to female weakness or a delicate nature. Husbands could go years without noticing the problem, preferring to see their wives as fragile angels in need of rest. Doctors, receiving generous fees, continued to write prescriptions, perpetuating this vicious circle. Mansions were turned into quiet sanatoriums where patients slowly faded away amid silk and velvet. This dark side of the age of innocence remained hidden behind the thick curtains of bedrooms and boudoirs. Society turned a blind eye to the fact that many of its brilliant representatives lived in a constant haze of drug intoxication. It was considered a private family matter, a minor weakness that could be forgiven in a refined nature. But behind this weakness lay a huge tragedy of lost lives and broken destinies. It is surprising how easily the medicine of the time turned healthy women into addicted shadows. Doctors sincerely believed that they were helping, and patients saw no other way out of their emotional impasse. It was a time when emotional pain was treated with chemicals without trying to understand its true causes. And the price of this treatment was sometimes worse than the disease itself. The story of these bottles is a story of how women tried to survive in a world that demanded perfection from them, but denied them the right to feel. Be sure to like this story if you were moved by this tale of hidden pain from the past. A secret passed down from generation to generation often turns to ashes in the fireplace. In an era when reputation was worth more than gold, correspondence was the most dangerous evidence that could ruin a life. The night hours often became a time when women sat down at their desks to pour out their souls on paper. They wrote letters that were never to be sent or read messages that had to be destroyed. The nighttime silence of the mansion was ideal for such secret rituals of destroying the past. The candlelight, the scratching of the pen, and the crackling of the fire in the fireplace created an atmosphere of conspiracy. The woman felt like the heroine of a novel, but in reality it was a struggle for survival in a cruel society. The fear of being exposed forced her to be extremely careful and attentive to detail. There were cases when letters were not burned, but hidden in secret compartments in desks or under the double bottoms of boxes. It was a huge risk, but sometimes the desire to preserve the memory of feelings outweighed the fear. These letters became a time bomb that could explode at any moment. And if the servants found such a hiding place, the fate of the mistress was completely in their hands. History knows many examples when a found letter became the cause of a high-profile divorce and social ostracism. Therefore, most women preferred not to take risks and entrusted their secrets only to fire. Watching the words of love turn black and crumble to dust was painful but necessary. It was like bearing a part of one's own soul that had no right to exist. Behind every burned letter was a living emotion, a moment of weakness or a flash of passion. The ashes in the fireplace were silent testimony that a woman's heart continued to live and feel, despite the prohibitions. These were traces of a real life that ran parallel to the official biography of a society lady. What do you think? Is it worth keeping letters from the past? Or is it better to let them go with the smoke? In the next chapter, we will talk about how the perfect outfit became an instrument of torture. The life of a woman of high society was unthinkable without jewelry, which served as a marker of family status. At night in front of the mirror, the mystery of removing these shining shackles took place. When the maid unfastened the heavy necklaces and removed the massive earrings, red marks often remained on the skin. These decorations, which aroused envy at balls, were in reality a heavy physical burden. The tiaras and diadems that adorned their hairstyles often dug into their heads, causing unbearable headaches by the end of the evening. But the rules of etiquette required them to wear them with their heads held high, without showing a hint of discomfort. A woman was a living showcase of her husband's wealth, and her comfort in this equation was not taken into account. She had to shine, even if every movement caused her discomfort or pain. Keeping the family jewels safe was also a source of constant anxiety and worry. Women were responsible for the safety of stones that were worth entire fortunes. Every night, they had to be counted, placed in velvet cases, and locked in a safe. The loss of even a small item could provoke the wrath of her husband and suspicion of the servants. Jewelry often had a dark history, passed down from generation to generation, along with curses and legends. Wearing a necklace that belonged to an unhappy grandmother was considered a bad omen, but tradition was stronger. Women became hostages to family heirlooms, obliged to show them off to the world. In the silence of the night, looking at her reflection without jewelry, a woman could see her true self. Without the sparkle of diamonds, she seemed vulnerable to herself, but at the same time free. These were rare moments when she belonged to herself, not to the history of her family. Jewelry was a beautiful but heavy chain that bound a woman to her social position. It was a symbol of her lack of freedom, disguised as incredible luxury. Do you think expensive gifts could compensate for the lack of personal happiness? Guess how long it took to create the perfect hourglass figure? The process of putting on and taking off a corset was a daily ritual reminiscent of medieval torture. In the morning, the maid would tighten the lacing, literally squeezing the air out of her mistress's lungs for the sake of a fashionable waist. In the evening, in the silence of the night, came the moment of liberation, when the body could finally take a full breath. Servants saw the marks that fashion left on women's bodies, dents from whalebone, abrasions, and bruises. Constant wearing of a tight corset deformed the ribs and compressed the internal organs, causing fainting. But this was considered a necessary sacrifice for beauty and conformity to social standards. A woman without a corset was considered loose, sloppy, and unworthy of going out in public. Maids often pitied their mistresses, seeing how they suffered from the demands of fashion and etiquette. They themselves wore simpler and softer corsets that allowed them to work and move freely. In this sense, a maid was freer than her mistress, who was shackled in silk and whalebone. The fashion of that era was merciless to female nature, trying to reshape it into an artificial ideal. Women voluntarily subjected themselves to these torments, fearing condemnation and loss of their status as beauties. It was a war with their own nature, which they waged every day in front of the mirror. There were whispers in the corridors that some ladies laced themselves so tightly that they broke their ribs. These rumors only fueled interest and made others lace themselves even tighter. The race for a slim waist was a madness that swept through high society. Do you think modern women are willing to make such sacrifices for beauty? In the next chapter, you will learn about the invisible tears that were shed when children went to bed. In large mansions, children lived their own separate lives, often on the upper floors, far from their parents' chambers. For a society lady, motherhood often boiled down to short visits to the nursery and formal appearances with her children dressed up. Real care, warmth, and upbringing were provided by nannies and governesses who became closer to the children than their own mothers. At night, when the house fell silent, many women felt this painful distance particularly acutely. The servants saw how the mistress sometimes went up to the nursery when the children were already asleep, just to look at them. She stood by the crib, not daring to wake the child or even straighten the blanket, so as not to disturb the routine. In these moments, the mother in her awoke, oppressed by social obligations and strict rules of upbringing. These were moments of quiet mourning for the closeness she never had. Having lost a child, a woman often withdrew into herself, turning into a shadow wandering around the house. Children's rooms became memorials where she came to cry alone. Servants tried to avoid these rooms, respecting the mother's grief and afraid of disturbing the ghosts. The silence in the house became unbearable and oppressive. But even if the children were healthy, their growing up meant an inevitable parting. Sons were sent to boarding schools, daughters were prepared for marriage. The house emptied, and the woman remained alone among the luxurious interiors, having fulfilled her duty. The realization that she had missed her children's childhood came too late. Motherhood in a gilded cage was deprived of many of the simple joys available to women from ordinary families. Wealth could not replace the warmth of life, laughter, and playing together. It was the price of status that women paid with their personal happiness. The servants who witnessed these dramas often pitied the rich children no less than their mothers. They saw how the little lords and ladies grew up in luxury but lacked parental love. Huge dining rooms designed to seat dozens of guests looked frighteningly empty on ordinary days. Dinner, which was supposed to bring the family together, often turned into silent torture for the spouses. They sat at opposite ends of the long table, separated by meters of polished wood and candelabra. The servants who served the courses heard only the clatter of cutlery on porcelain and the occasional formal phrase. This silence was more eloquent than any shouting. It spoke of complete indifference and weariness with each other. Topics of conversation had been exhausted years ago, and common interest had never emerged. Each was immersed in their own thoughts, dreams, or regrets, unwilling to share them with their partner. Dinner was a ritual that simply had to be endured, maintaining the appearance of propriety. The servants moved silently around the table, trying not to attract attention or disturb the heavy silence. They became part of the interior, living mechanisms for serving food, which the host preferred not to notice. But the footmen saw everything: the bored look on the mistress's face, the master's irritation, and the untouched food. They felt the tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud. For women, this loneliness was especially painful, as their world was limited to the walls of their homes. Their husbands could go to the club, hunting, or on business, while they remained prisoners of the dining room and living room. Food ceased to bring pleasure, becoming merely fuel to sustain life. Many suffered from a lack of appetite or, conversely, secretly ate sweets to cope with stress. The servants in the kitchen discussed among themselves this strange life of the rich, where the food was exquisite and the atmosphere unbearable. They pitied the mistress who, despite having the best chefs, often left her plates full. In their simple families, dinner was a time of noise, arguments, and laughter, which was so lacking in the mansion. Wealth did not guarantee warmth, and the long table became a symbol of this truth. It was a golden desert that had to be crossed every evening. In a society where a woman's value was determined by her beauty and ability to bear heirs, old age was a death sentence. Mirrors in mansions became enemies that housewives began to avoid in bright light. At night, by candlelight, they would stare at their faces for a long time, looking for new wrinkles and gray hairs. The fear of losing their attractiveness was the fear of losing influence and becoming invisible in their own homes. Maids saw more and more jars of miracle creams and ointments appearing on dressing tables. Women were willing to spend huge sums of money on dubious remedies that promised eternal youth. They endured painful procedures, slept in special masks, and drank disgusting tinctures. It was a desperate battle against time that could not be won. Servants who had grown old alongside their masters treated them with understanding and sympathy. An old nanny or maid became the only confidants with whom one could be oneself. They remembered their mistress when she was young and beautiful, and this shared memory brought them closer together. In old age, social boundaries were somewhat blurred in the face of shared inevitability. Some women tried to compensate for their loss of beauty with active charity work or religiosity. They sought new meaning in life, trying to be useful and significant in another sphere. It was a way to maintain self-respect and find comfort in serving others. But deep down, the longing for lost youth remained forever. Fear of the future, of infirmity and loneliness, tormented many inhabitants of luxurious bedrooms. They saw examples of older relatives living out their lives in distant rooms, forgotten by everyone. Such a prospect was more frightening than death, forcing them to cling to life with their last ounce of strength. Old age in a gilded cage was comfortable but joyless, devoid of hope and prospects. It was a sunset that had to be faced alone, even when surrounded by servants. The late Victorian era and the Gilded Age were fading into the past, giving way to a new, noisy, and incomprehensible age. Mansions that had seemed like impregnable fortresses began to decay and lose their former glory. It became increasingly difficult to maintain a large staff of servants, and many rooms were closed, plunged into eternal darkness. The women who had been the heart and soul of these houses felt that their world was collapsing along with the old order. The night corridors, once full of secrets, now stood empty and echoing, deprived of their guardians. The secrets they hid lost their meaning and turned into historical anecdotes. The dramas of the past seemed naive and distant against the backdrop of impending global upheavals. The era of great silence and great pretense was coming to an end. Women who had outlived their time became living monuments to a bygone era. Guardians of tradition, they continued to stand up straight, wear mourning clothes, and observe etiquette, even if no one needed them to anymore. This was their last resistance to the chaos of the new world, their quiet feet. They took with them to the grave secrets that no one ever learned. The servants scattered around the world sometimes remembered their old masters with nostalgia, or conversely, with bitterness. But they were the only ones who knew the truth about what happened behind closed doors. Their stories became legends, overgrown with fiction and turned into folklore. Thus, the history of real people dissolved into myths. As we bid farewell to this era, we see not only the glitter of gold, but also the tears it hid. We understand that behind the beautiful facade lay a complex life full of pain and restrictions. And perhaps we begin to appreciate our own freedom a little more. These houses still stand today, converted into museums, and tourists walk the same corridors without hearing their whispers. But if you listen carefully, you can catch echoes of those long-ago dramas and feel the breath of the past. We have walked through the dark corridors of the past, peered into boudoir, and heard the echoes of long silent passions. The history of Victorian and Gilded Age mansions is not just a list of balls and receptions. It is a chronicle of women's destinies, full of invisible struggles, hidden tears, and moments of quiet despair. Wealth was no guarantee of happiness, but often became a golden cage from which there was no escape. The servants, those silent witnesses, saw the true price of luxury: loneliness, cold marriages, and fear of public opinion. Through their eyes, we saw the underside of a glittering life, where human feelings were sacrificed for status and reputation. These stories make us think about what is really important in life and how the world has changed since then. How did this story about the secret lives of the great houses make you feel? Share your thoughts in the comments, suggest topics for future videos you would like to see, and be sure to subscribe to our channel.